I had been working as a 911 dispatcher for only 3 weeks when I answered a call that everyone else in the room told me to ignore. The girl on the phone sounded about 7 years old. "Please help me. My mum is lying on the kitchen floor and my dad locked me in the basement." I immediately tried to send a patrol car, but my supervisor stopped me. "Hang up." "What?" "That house has been empty for 5 months. I had taken the job because my wife was pregnant and we were almost broke. The salary was good, the health insurance was even better, and I could not afford to lose the position by arguing with my supervisor. But I could still hear the girl breathing on the other end of the line. "Are you still there?" "Yes, I'm here. What's your name?" She did not answer. "I can hear him on the stairs." Behind her voice, I heard a slow, steady sound. Drip, drip, drip. Water hitting concrete. I looked at my supervisor. He was still watching me, so I disconnected the call. The dispatcher sitting beside me explained that the same number had been calling for months. Deputies had already searched the house several times after the family disappeared, but they had never found anyone inside. The sheriff's office eventually decided it was a prank and told the dispatchers to stop sending patrol cars. The next night, the girl called again. "He has a hammer. I'm hiding under the stairs. The police already searched that house. There's no one there." The girl began to cry, but she was trying to do it quietly. "Please tell them to hurry." I logged the call as a system error and disconnected, but she kept calling. Sometimes she said she could hear her father walking above her. Once, she asked me whether it was morning yet. Another night, she whispered that her mother was walking around the kitchen. "I thought your mother was lying on the floor." The girl went silent. After several seconds, she finally answered, "Maybe it isn't, Mum." After that, I could no longer convince myself that it was just a prank. On my next day off, I drove to the address without telling my wife. The house looked abandoned. The lawn was overgrown. The windows were covered in dirt, and there was no furniture inside. The front door was locked, but the old sliding door at the back opened after I pulled it hard enough. I stepped inside. I searched the kitchen first. There was no blood, no broken furniture, and no sign that anyone had ever been attacked there. Then I found the basement door. The basement was unfinished, with concrete walls and an old water heater standing in the corner. As soon as I reached the bottom of the stairs, I heard it. Drip, drip, drip. Water was leaking from a pipe above me and falling onto the concrete floor. It was the exact same sound I had heard during every call. I looked underneath the stairs, checked behind the water heater, and searched every corner of the basement. There was nobody there, no child. I left the house feeling ridiculous. I had broken into an abandoned property because I had allowed a stranger's voice to get inside my head. That night, the same address appeared on my screen again. The dispatcher beside me noticed it immediately. "Don't answer." I stared at the flashing line for a few seconds. Then I picked up. "911? What is your emergency?" This time, there was no little girl. There was no crying and no sound of dripping water. Instead, a woman spoke. "Why do you keep answering? Who is this?" The others stopped listening months ago. "Are you the girl's mother?" She ignored the question. "You went to the house." My body went still. "How do you know that?" "You searched the basement." "Yes, but there was nothing there." "You didn't look closely enough." I looked around the dispatch room. Nobody else appeared to be listening. The woman told me to return to the basement and look behind the stairs. Find the third wooden beam from the left. Near the floor, there is a rusted steel nail. I remembered the beams beneath the staircase. What am I supposed to do with it? Pull it out. What's behind the wall? For a moment, the woman said nothing. Then she whispered, "She is still waiting for you." When my shift ended, I drove straight back to the house. The sun was already coming up, but the basement was still almost completely dark. I walked behind the stairs and counted the wooden beams. 1, 2, 3. Right near the floor, exactly where the woman had told me, I spotted a rusted nail buried deep in the wood. I grabbed a pair of pliers from my car and pulled it free. At first, nothing happened. Then the plywood shifted. It wasn't a wall, it was a hidden door. The second I pulled it open, a wave of rotten air hit me so hard I covered my mouth. Behind the stairs was a narrow crawl space with nothing but dirt beneath it. There were 2 bodies inside. Both were wrapped in blue plastic. One was much smaller than the other. A tiny hand was sticking through a tear in the plastic. Lying beside it was a little pink toy phone. I ran outside and called the sheriff's office. Within minutes, the street filled with police cars. Crime scene investigators disappeared into the basement while I sat at the end of the driveway, trying not to throw up. Eventually, one of the investigators walked over to me. The bodies belonged to the missing mother and her 7-year-old daughter. Both had been beaten to death and hidden beneath the house before it was abandoned. The father had been the primary suspect from the beginning. He had emptied the family's bank accounts, sold their car under a fake name, and vanished. But until the bodies were discovered, the police couldn't prove a murder had even taken place. The investigator asked how I had found the hidden room. I lied. I told him the wooden frame looked uneven and I had accidentally pulled the nail loose. He looked at me for a few seconds. Then he simply nodded and walked away. After that, the call stopped. I went back to work. The address never appeared on my screen again. For the next 3 months, I checked every update from the sheriff's office, hoping they had finally caught the father. They hadn't. Eventually, I started questioning my own memory. Maybe someone really had been playing a cruel prank. Maybe I had connected things that were never connected at all. Then one night, the auxiliary phone on my supervisor's desk started ringing. My shift had already ended. Almost everyone else had gone home. I picked it up. The woman's voice came through the line. They found him. I slowly sat back down. Where? He'd been working nights at a warehouse 3 counties away. The police arrested him 30 minutes ago. I let out a breath I didn't even realize I'd been holding. So, it's over? Yes, but I wanted to thank you. For finding you? No, for answering her. I didn't know what to say. The woman spoke again. Everyone else hung up. You were the only one who kept listening when she was alone in the dark. I looked across the empty dispatch room. She doesn't have to call anymore. No, her voice softened. She's finally asleep. The line went dead. The father is now in custody, and his trial is expected to begin this fall. I still don't know how those calls reached our dispatch center, or how that woman knew exactly where the bodies had been hidden. I only know one thing. A frightened little girl asked for help, and almost everyone decided she was just another prank. Sometimes, the voice on the other end of the line doesn't need you to understand what's happening. It just needs someone.
I never believed in ghost stories. Even now, after everything that happened, I'm still looking for a logical explanation. Last Tuesday, I couldn't sleep. The TV was playing quietly in the background while rain tapped against my apartment windows. I was lying on the couch, mindlessly scrolling through my phone, when it suddenly started ringing. At first, I didn't think much of it. Then I looked at the screen. The caller ID wasn't unknown. It wasn't a friend's name. It was my own phone number. Every single digit matched. I just stared at it until the ringing stopped. A second later, a voicemail appeared. I remember thinking, okay, somebody's messing with me. These days it's easy to fake a phone number, and AI can copy someone's voice almost perfectly. So I pressed play. For the first few seconds, there was nothing except quiet breathing. Then someone spoke. It was my voice. Not a voice that sounded similar. Mine. Exactly mine. Whatever you do, don't answer if I call again. The message ended. I actually laughed. It was creepy, sure, but it still felt like some elaborate prank. Then, exactly 10 seconds later, someone knocked on my apartment door. 3 slow knocks. Not loud, not angry, just patient. I walked over to the peephole and looked outside. The hallway was completely empty. The lights were on. Every apartment door was closed. There wasn't a single person there. I even unlocked my door and looked both ways. Nothing. No sound at all. As soon as I stepped back inside, my phone rang again. My own number. This time I answered. I didn't even get the chance to say hello. My voice spoke first. Good. A short pause. You finally picked up. Every hair on my arms stood up. I pulled the phone away from my ear, convinced I'd somehow started the voicemail again. But the call timer was still moving. This wasn't a recording. Listen carefully, my voice said. Don't interrupt me. And whatever happens next, don't let it hear your voice. What are you talking about? I asked. The line went completely silent. Then, I heard something outside my apartment. A a slow scratching sound, like someone was dragging their fingernails down the other side of my front door. It started near the top and slowly moved all the way to the floor. I stopped breathing. It's here. What is? It followed. Something knocked again. Not at the front door. From inside my apartment. The sound came from the hallway behind me. 3 slow knocks. I turned around. Nothing. The hallway was empty. The bathroom door was open. The bedroom door was open. Everything looked exactly the way I'd left it. Then my phone spoke again. Don't move. I stood perfectly still. Whatever is inside with you doesn't know exactly where you are yet. I wanted to ask 100 questions. Instead, I whispered, "What is it? It doesn't have a name." Another knock echoed through the apartment. This time it came from my bedroom wall. 3 knocks, a pause, then 3 more. I could actually see a framed photo trembling with each hit. "It's looking for your voice," the caller said. "The moment it hears you speak normally, it knows where you are." I lowered my voice even more. "Why me?" Another long silence. Finally, "Because it followed me." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. "What do you mean, you?" The answer came so quietly, I almost missed it. "I'm not pretending to be you. I am you." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was impossible. "No," I said. "That's impossible." "You said the exact same thing." The scratching at my front door stopped. For a few seconds, the apartment became completely silent. Then someone started walking across my living room. Slow footsteps, bare feet. I couldn't see anyone, but I heard every step. 1, 2, 3. The floor creaked just a few feet away. I held my breath. Then the footsteps stopped, right beside me. I could feel someone standing there, close enough that the hairs on my neck started moving. But there was nothing. Not a shadow, not a reflection, nothing. "Don't turn around." Of course, I turned around. There was no one there. Then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The TV screen had gone black. It wasn't turned off. It was reflecting the room. The couch, the table, the hallway, me, and someone standing directly behind me. I spun around. Nothing. I looked back at the TV. The figure was still there. Tall, too thin, its head tilted slightly to one side. It wasn't looking at me. It was looking at the phone in my hand. My own voice sighed. "You weren't supposed to see it yet." The figure inside the reflection slowly lifted one hand. Then it smiled. Not a normal smile. Its mouth kept stretching wider and wider until it reached both sides of its face. The TV suddenly filled with static. The reflection disappeared. Then every light in my apartment turned off. Darkness swallowed everything. I heard something breathing right next to my ear. Not behind me, not in front of me, beside me. A warm breath touched my neck. Then a familiar voice whispered, "Daniel." It wasn't my mother. It wasn't the thing outside. It wasn't the voice on the phone. It was my own. Exactly the way I sounded when I was 17, the night of the accident. "You left me there." I couldn't breathe. The phone finally spoke again. "Now you remember. I never forgot," I whispered. "No, you only convinced yourself that you did." The breathing beside me stopped. For one long second, everything was quiet. Then the voice behind me smiled. "You answered." I felt a hand rest gently on my shoulder.
Something happened a few months ago that I still can't explain. I've tried telling myself there was a rational answer, that I misunderstood something, that stress made me imagine the whole thing, but every time I remember that night, I come to the same conclusion. Whatever got into my car wasn't Jessica. I had just finished a late shift at work, nothing unusual. I said goodnight to my coworker Jeff, got in my car and started a 30-minute drive home. Most of the trip was along an empty country road where my phone usually lost signal after the first few miles. I had barely left the parking lot when my phone rang. Jessica. I hadn't seen or spoken to my ex in almost a year. For a second, I considered letting it ring. Instead, I pulled over and answered. Before I could even say hello, she started talking. Please, I need your help. She sounded terrified. I can't explain right now. Just come to the Cypress Street bus station. Please, hurry. The call ended. Just like that. I called her back immediately. No answer. I sat there staring at my phone, wondering why she would call me instead of the police if something was really wrong. Then I remembered her voice. She hadn't sounded angry. She hadn't sounded drunk. She sounded desperate. So I turned the car around. The bus stop wasn't far. When I pulled up, I spotted her almost immediately. She was sitting alone under the shelter, with her hands tucked inside an oversized grey coat. She looked freezing. For a moment, I felt ridiculous for worrying. She was obviously fine. I rolled down my window. Jess? She didn't react. I thought maybe I'd mistaken someone else for her. Then she slowly turned toward me. Her expression was strange. Not scared, more like confused, as if she'd forgotten where she was. She stood up and walked toward the car. Her movements caught my attention immediately. Not because they were dramatic, because they were just slightly wrong. She wasn't limping, she wasn't drunk, but every step looked as though she'd watched someone else walk and was trying to copy it. When she reached the passenger door, she looked at me for several long seconds before speaking. Oh, a small smile appeared on her face. It's you. She climbed inside without waiting for an invitation. The door closed. Neither of us spoke. I glanced at her. So, what happened? She kept staring through the windshield. I don't know. You called me. I did? She frowned as though the question genuinely surprised her. I don't remember. That was enough to make me uneasy. Jessica had always been sarcastic, always quick with a joke. This didn't feel like her at all. You sounded terrified, I said. You said you needed help. She slowly turned her head toward me. So I did. Another smile. I just wanted a familiar face. Her words sounded normal. The way she said them didn't. Every sentence came after a pause, as if she had to decide which words humans were supposed to use next. I started driving. The first few minutes passed in silence. I tried making conversation. She answered every question with the shortest response possible. Sometimes she didn't answer at all. Instead, she just watched me. Not the road, not the dashboard. Me. Whenever I caught her looking, she'd immediately turn toward the window. A minute later, I'd catch her staring again. It wasn't the kind of look an ex gives you after running into each other. It felt more like someone studying an animal they'd never seen before. Finally, I asked, what actually happened tonight? She thought about it for a long time. I was attacked. By who? I don't know. Were you hurt? Another pause. I think so. You think so? She looked down at her hands as though she'd only just noticed they belonged to her. I don't feel much anymore. Those words stayed with me. Not because of what she said, but because she sounded almost disappointed. About 20 minutes passed before either of us spoke again. The road ahead was empty, just two lanes stretching into darkness, broken only by the occasional reflector flashing in my headlights. Jessica hadn't moved. She was sitting perfectly still, one hand resting in her lap, the other against the window. Then she asked, "How long have we known each other?" The question caught me off guard. I laughed quietly. 3 years. Oh, she nodded. And were we happy? I glanced at her. What kind of question is that? She looked back out the window. I don't know. Another long silence. A few minutes later, she spoke again. What was your favorite thing about me? There was something unsettling about the way she asked it. Not emotional, not nostalgic, just curious. Like someone reading questions from a list. I smiled anyway. You used to sing in the car. She slowly turned toward me. I did? Constantly. She stared at me for another few seconds. I should probably do that now. Instead, she sat in complete silence. Something wasn't right. Jessica had always filled every quiet moment with conversation. She hated silence. The woman beside me seemed perfectly comfortable with it. I reached over and turned the radio on. Soft music filled the car. She immediately flinched, not dramatically, just enough for me to notice. Too loud? I asked. She nodded once. I lowered the volume. A few seconds later, she whispered, "I don't like voices." For some reason, that sentence stayed with me. About 10 minutes later, I finally got back into town. My phone buzzed, then again, and again. Signal. I stopped at a red light and glanced at the screen. 3 unread messages. Jessica. I frowned. That didn't make any sense. She was sitting less than 2 feet away. I opened the first message. "Where are you?" "I'm still at the bus station." For a second, I honestly thought I was reading it wrong. I looked at Jessica. She was staring out the passenger window. I opened the second message. "Please don't panic. If someone picked you up, it isn't me." Every muscle in my body locked. The third message appeared while I was still reading. It copied me. "Please don't look at it for too long. It learns from people watching it." The light turned green. Cars behind me started honking. I barely heard them. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped my phone. Very slowly, I looked toward the passenger seat. Jessica hadn't moved. She was still looking out the window. Then, without turning her head, she smiled. Not because she'd seen the messages, because she'd seen my reflection in the passenger side window. "I told you not to answer." I froze. "I never said anything," I whispered. "You didn't have to." Her smile grew a little wider. "I heard your heartbeat." For the first time that night, I didn't think I was sitting next to Jessica anymore. I needed to get out of the car. Not run, not panic, just separate myself from whatever this was. A gas station appeared about a mile ahead. Bright lights, security cameras, other people. I pulled into the parking lot. "We're here," I said. She looked around slowly. "Home?" I forced a smile. "Almost. I'll grab us something to eat." She watched me for several seconds. Then she nodded. "That would be nice." She opened the passenger door and stepped outside. I waited. 1 second. 2. The moment both of her feet touched the pavement, I threw the car into reverse. The tires screamed across the concrete. I expected her to run after me. She didn't. She simply stood there, watching, smiling, until her smile slipped. Not faded, slipped, like it wasn't attached properly. The corners of her mouth stretched farther than they should have. Her jaw lowered without opening. Then her head tilted. 45 degrees, 60, 90. It kept going. I slammed the accelerator to the floor. In my mirror, she was still standing exactly where I'd left her. Not chasing me, just watching, as though she'd learned everything she wanted. Then my phone buzzed again. Another message from Jessica. "Are you still alive?"
If this story gave you chills, don't forget to subscribe, because the next one might be even worse.